When Viktor Frankl walked out of the Turkheim camp on April 27, 1945, he was 39 years old, severely malnourished, and nearly alone in the world. He had entered the camp system with a wife, a mother, a brother, and a completed manuscript, a book on logotherapy he had hidden by sewing it into the lining of his coat. By the end, the manuscript was gone, destroyed by camp authorities. His wife, Tilly, had died in Bergen-Belsen. His mother had been killed in Auschwitz. His brother Walter had died in the same complex. He was free. He had almost nothing else. What happened in the months and years that followed is, in many ways, the most powerful argument for everything Frankl ever wrote or taught. Because he did not collapse. He did not disappear into grief, though grief was everywhere. He returned to Vienna, to medicine, to writing, to lecturing, to life. His first act of reconstruction was the book. Within weeks of liberation, he dictated man's search for meaning in 9 days. The act was deliberate, a refusal to let the meaning of the experience dissolve. He had watched people die in the camps for reasons that had nothing to do with their physical condition and everything to do with whether they had something to live for. Now, in freedom, he practiced what he had observed. He gave the suffering a shape. He turned it into testimony. But the rebuilding was not only intellectual. It was profoundly personal, and it was not without darkness. Frankl later spoke honestly about the difficult period of return, the disorientation of freedom after years of captivity, the grief that did not announce itself in orderly waves but arrived at strange, unexpected moments. He described a sense of depersonalization, of walking through Vienna and not quite believing he was there. The city had changed. He had changed. Many people he had known were gone. He returned to medicine, becoming head of the neurology department at the Vienna Polyclinic Hospital, a position he would hold for 25 years. The work was not a distraction from grief. It was a response to it. Frankl understood, at the level of lived experience, what it meant to need a reason to go on. That understanding made him an extraordinary clinician. Patients who came to him in existential despair were not met with detached professionalism. They were met with someone who had been to the bottom and come back with something to say. In 1947, 2 years after liberation, Frankl married Eleanor Schwint, Ellie, a young nurse he had met in Vienna. The marriage would last until his death in 1997, 50 years. Together they had a daughter, Gabrielle. The life Frankl built with Ellie was not a replacement for what he had lost. He never pretended otherwise, but it was a genuine new beginning, and he embraced it fully. He spoke about Ellie with deep warmth throughout his life. She was, he said, a partner in the truer sense, present, grounding, and deeply committed to the work. The lectures began almost immediately and never really stopped. Frankl would eventually speak at more than 200 universities around the world, including Harvard, Stanford, and Duquesne. He received 29 honorary doctoral degrees. He learned to fly at age 67. He climbed mountains into his 80s. These were not performances of vitality. They were expressions of a man who had decided, consciously, deliberately, to be present in his own life. What made Frankl's reconstruction possible was not the absence of pain but the presence of meaning. He did not pretend the loss had not happened. He integrated it. The suffering became part of the foundation rather than a weight that crushed it. Logotherapy teaches that attitude toward unavoidable suffering is itself a form of meaning, perhaps the most profound form. Frankl did not just teach this. He lived it, publicly, for decades. His story is not a story about bouncing back. Resilience is too light a word. It is a story about transformation, about taking what is broken and building something new that carries the shape of what was lost without being defined by its absence. It is a story about choosing, over and over, to say yes to life even when life has said no to you in the cruelest possible ways. Subscribe to The Psychology of Viktor Frankl to explore more of his timeless ideas.